Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Pooja Pillai, and on behalf of the Indian Express, I welcome you to the latest edition of Express Adda. Express Adda, which began 9 years ago, has been a hugely successful series of informal conversations with news and opinion makers. But since the COVID-19 lockdown began, we have seamlessly moved it online so that we can continue to engage in these vital and stimulating conversations. Our last IADA with Union Minister Nitin Gadkari was recorded right after the government announced the first financial relief package, and it was a huge hit. And we have no reason to believe that today won't be just as big a hit. Our guest today is Uday Shankar, President of the Walt Disney Company for Asia Pacific, and the Chairman of Star and Disney India, and Senior Vice President FICCI. As the country slowly unlocks, sporting activities are starting to resume, and we are hoping that the IPL will possibly be played later this year. So it seemed fitting to invite Uday, who is perhaps one of the most influential people in sports today, and certainly a key figure in Indian entertainment and media. Uday will be in conversation with Anant Goenka, Executive Director of the Indian Express, and Sandeep Dwivedi, National Sports Editor, the Indian Express. Before I hand over the proceedings to Anant and Sandeep, I would like to thank our associate partner Bagris for their association with us. Thank you.
Cool, wonderful. Thanks, Pooja. Ladies and gentlemen, very good evening and warm welcome to all of you. We have a particularly distinguished audience today, and I'm not surprised because Uday's track record of being a decisive doer who acts on both data and instincts in equal measure is as refreshing as it is rare to find in the media industry. And I say this about the media industry, not just in India, but anywhere in the world. So Uday, welcome.
Thank you.
Uday, it's been fun and fascinating for me to research your eventful 31-year career in media, especially because I think I am 30-something years old and somewhat in the same industry. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, as I'm sure the audience is. We've also got some comments and questions from some surprise guests, which I'm quite excited about. But before all that, Uday, since I think at the heart of everything you've done, you know, it comes out that you are a news person. Let's start with the news. We're approaching 100 days of lockdown, sitting on a healthcare crisis. Economic uncertainty persists. And to make matters worse, there's a fear of escalation with tensions with China, protectionism to the extent that TikTok and 59 Chinese apps are banned. From your vantage point, can I ask you to just break these headlines down for us?
I think it's a perfect storm, Anant. I don't think in our memory, any of us who would have imagined that there would be so many crises just coming together at the same time and each sort of making the other one look worse, and the atmosphere of fear is perfect. I think if you look at it, the COVID crisis is a really serious one, not just in this country but all over the world. And the bad news is that it's really serious. It's likely to affect everybody and anybody, but it could be a lot worse. That's the good news. And as a newsman, you tend to look at both sides of it. First, the bad news, and then once the bad news persists for some time, you start looking for the silver lining in it. And I think the silver lining is that India still has done a lot better than a lot of other countries. And ironically as it may sound, the crisis of COVID-19 could have been a lot worse given the unique challenges of this country. The economy. If we were having this conversation in April or early May, the economic situation looked really, really bad. In fact, we've been discussing internally whether all the risks and all the fear that we had, which ones of those were exaggerated and which ones of those were realistic. And I think, like most things that are complex, some of the economic fears were exaggerated as it is turning out to be, and some of them were actually understated. So as we play along over the next few months, my biggest problem is that it's difficult to take a fix on the economy, primarily because we still don't have a fix on the trajectory of the infection itself. and that's the single most dynamic variable over there. Because if the infection continues to grow, and if the graph, as they say, doesn't flatline and start coming down, then all projections can be impacted by that. And on top of that, the whole Chinese tension on the border, I think it's a real serious one. But I also think that these are two very strong, mature countries, and already there are signs that people are trying to resolve the tension on both sides. But the perfect atmosphere of fear that it has created in this country is a real cause for worry. People need to be fearless, especially in times of crisis. And what concerns me the most is that we have some real crisis, and the fear is making it worse in everybody.
But the news, the escalation that happened last night to ban specific apps, now you see Xiaomi covering its logos with Make in India signs. This is very different from. Have you seen something like this before?
No, we haven't seen something like this before. But that's exactly what I was saying. That this is an unprecedented, mix of storms and crises that we are living through. And I think rationality is not the default mode for anyone at this time. I think this is totally unprecedented, and probably, there are other ways and better ways of handling this, frankly, because it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help resolve the tension. But when we in a real world, symbolism sometimes gets the better of rational decision making.
Sure. The culture that you have experienced, you've been the head of possibly one of the most successful multinational, India stories of any multinational conglomerate, and the culture with both the Murdochs and with Disney is truly one of globalization. How do you kind of process the protectionism which is happening across the world, in India especially, but across the world? Do you think there's a bit of does it clash with the culture that you have kind of that you've championed really for 20 years now?
So two things. First and foremost, the answer that I'm about to give is my personal point of view, and is not the point of view of either my company or any of the people that you mentioned. But I think we are going through a massive reaction against globalization. The globalization of the 3 previous decades that was running, almost on. I think we are seeing a reaction against that. And globalization is disintegrating, if not already disintegrated everywhere. And you're seeing rise of protectionism. And I think it's not, the advocates and protagonists and the drivers of globalization should have been mindful of this. Because if the unbridled globalization that was going on without, any concern for the people at the bottom of the pyramid, whether they were benefiting from globalization or it was just a rhetoric that was benefiting the top half and the bottom half was totally unaffected. In democratic politics or otherwise, it would be difficult for any political establishment or leadership to ignore that forever. If globalization meant lots of FDI and lots of money that came in, but only foreign goods were also flooding the market, whether you like it or not, it would lead to a reaction. And I think that is where the model like Star India's is a relevant model that everyone should think about. Star is a foreign company, is owned by foreign entities, first News Corp and Fox, and now by the Walt Disney Company, which has acquired the 21st Century Fox company. But Star is in the minds of the consumers, in the minds of the people here, as a brand, in its culture, in its content, in its product, in every respect. It's a truly Indian company. Indians run it, Indians create the product, and Indians offer it for Indians. It's customized for the Indians. And that is a model that, where it's a good mix of globalization and localization. You cannot disregard one or the other. Globalization has its own advantages, and as you said, I have seen that from very close quarters. We wouldn't have been able to build Star India. We would not have been able to do the kind of things that we have done, including revival of something as deep and innate as Kabaddi, which is truly an Indian tradition, but it was bankrolled by the money that came from a global corporation. So, but if you do not do that, then there would be issues. And I think the advocates of globalization tended to disregard that. And now, unfortunately, we are seeing a reaction to that.
If I can get in here, you said about symbolism is important at times, but in case if it goes beyond that, and the Chinese company have got huge presence in cricket in terms of BCCI sponsorship and also on television. Now, tomorrow, in case the government decides that everybody needs to boycott Chinese companies and you can't take their sponsorship, somebody who's invested so much in cricket for so long, where does it place you?
So two things. Look, first of all, in national interest, every government has the right to decide what they want to do, and everybody has to comply with that, whether we like it or not. But the second point, and that's a very material point because I'm seeing this being discussed everywhere. When we invested in cricket, we did not invest on the back of companies from any country or any specific companies. We invested in cricket. We believed that cricket had the power, and that power comes from its popularity and depth of its engagement with Indian consumers. And I'm a firm believer that if people like something so passionately, there'll be people who will be willing to put money behind that. There is a monetization model that you can create. So if company X or Y is not there because in the larger social interest or national interest, it's been decided, so we'll have to figure out a different monetization model.
Do you find, Uday, that in this in the growing sort of polarization that's happening around the world, when I read news of Unilever stopping to advertise on Facebook, I thought that this polarization is finally coming and impacting adversely even the media business. Do you, when you see that kind of a thing happening, do you see advertisers also becoming, being forced to take a view? They're spending money. Earlier was only on demographics, reach, frequency, and that was advertising. Now things like where you advertise, almost it's like you're taking a stand, a political stand. How do you read again, that particular news item and sort of how this plays out?
So you're very right, Anant. I think the advertisers are beginning to respond to a lot of these pressure points, but then advertisers are part of the society. They create their products and services and sell to the society. They need to exist and they need the endorsement of the society. So if there is a certain trend in the society that's becoming stronger, it is only natural for them to respond to that. And I think that is exactly what's happening today. Also, when you're putting money and when you're sticking your brand, on the back of some media vehicle, you don't want any negative publicity. Sometimes it's irrational, sometimes it's tactical, but people want to be just careful. Let's just hold on.
And the idea of content now, whatever the content is, in this increasingly polarized society, what content you consume and what kind of content you share is become such a big part of people's identity.
Yes.
Is that something that you think is again a new trend, or it's something that we're just sort of magnifying and overemphasizing?
Look, I think it's not a new trend. I think it was always the latent trend. I think it's being articulated and it's bubbling up a lot more vocally now. Also, we must realize that the volume of content that's getting created today in the world is enormously high, and it's growing on an everyday basis. And how people navigate through that content and how do they make their choices is clearly a reflection of their own priorities, their own belief, and their own preferences.
But our audiences, go ahead. Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, but our audience is getting, very thin-skinned. Are they becoming very intolerant to anything that isn't sort of agreeing or sort of that may be seen as, that doesn't agree with their worldview?
I think we are all getting very, very thin-skinned in general. Or as audiences, as establishment, as political leadership, as businessmen, and as media people, we are as a society globally, and in this country too, which particularly concerns me, is that we are becoming increasingly thin-skinned or intolerant. And the funny thing is that we all want to have the freedom and the authority and the space to express our point of view, and that we think is the right to be liberal. That's the way you are a liberal. But they don't believe that liberalism also means, or tolerance also means, that you hear the other point of view, no matter how repugnant that point of view might be.
Sure.
So we are living in a funny world increasingly, where my point of view is the most relevant point of view, and hence it must be expressed. But anyone who disagrees with me, there is a lynch mindset that goes after that. And I think this cuts across the spectrum, sad to say, whether the liberals are as intolerant of the non-liberal point of view and vice versa. And there are unfortunately or fortunately, there are lots more mechanisms today. Through social media, you can say anything and react and upload and make it available to millions of people. And there is this whole desire, I call it the cricket score syndrome, that how many more runs you can score. Everybody is being driven by that. Right. So how many followers I have on Twitter, how many followers I have on Instagram, how many people read me, how many people like, unlike, etc., etc. So there is an incentive that's been built into making your position sharper, because sharper positions cut through and get you noticed.
And as the head of a network, how responsive do you think you have to be? I mean, take the example right now. Patal Lok, the amount of social media trolling that happened on Patal Lok from, again, arguably one quarter. Even today, shocking amount of comments that were coming on social media, specifically targeting, Alia, Karan, all these so-called, second generation, third generation, people in the film industry. How do you factor that? I mean, do you have to factor that in, or do you have to become like newspeople like us and just grow thick skin and say, I'm going to do what I always do?
A bit of both, Anant. As news people, every day you apply your judgment on things. On stories. Every story is important to someone or the other, but you cannot carry every story. And that's what an editor like you does every day, that you make a selection. And after that, within that, which story, what would be the order of priority and how you will treat that. And within each story, there are points of view, and which point of view you take. That is what you do every day, even when you're running an entertainment network or anything like that. But the question is, do you balance it or not?
Right.
The question is, are you driven by facts, or are you driven only by momentary emotions? And that, as long as it's based on a long-term social perspective. And I'm a big believer that while freedom of media is paramount and it's essential to the foundation of a good society, media's responsibility itself cannot be cannot be abandoned. We have to be.
You're talking on entertainment.
I'm talking about entertainment.
Okay.
You cannot say that in the name of creativity and freedom, I will show everything. All the same, you cannot say that just because you don't like what I'm creating, I should be lynched.
And what about the box office? One thing that we keep hearing is, in the entertainment world, the box office is considered much more than it is in the news world. So, at what point do you say there's so much of backlash that's happened on, say, X, web series or X personality? How conscious are you of that backlash and the potential impact on the box office, whatever box office and definition of box office in your world is?
I don't think there is a standard template, but I can tell you about my own, thumb rule, how I go about it. Right. So I'm very clear that at Star Network, we've had our share of controversies, but doing content that in the larger social interest is harmful is not something that we can be accused of. And I'm very clear about that we shall not do just to gain market share, just to attract eyeballs. We won't do a certain kind of content, because I genuinely believe that each society's ability to deal with a certain kind of content is only limited at a point in time. It keeps evolving, and that is why I am against a formal regulation, because regulations are rigid and they do not evolve. But dynamically, we all have to judge the larger impact of what we are doing.
Specifically, I'll just push you on one specific piece. The casual trolling has really surprised me, and I think it's ridiculous. Is that something that concerns you when you think about the next season of Coffee with Karan?
No, look, first of all, next season of Coffee with Karan will be judged on the merit of when the next season should be done. And I don't think this will be a factor, at least not in my mind. I can be very clear about that. But the trolling itself was unfortunate. I mean, I would like to say that the loss of any life is tragic, and loss of a promising young life is very, very tragic. But to play politics and to push personal agenda on the back of that is really, really repugnant. And I would also like to say that, just because somebody has, somebody's life has been lost, no matter how tragic it is, but all those who are living do not become culprits just because of that.
Wonderful. Sandeep?
I'll slightly change track to sports broadcasting. So I'll start with junior cricket, one pet peeve I have. I was watching the Under-19 Cricket World Cup, India-Bangladesh, and it was on Hotstar. So you don't get ads between overs, and you could hear the stump mic. It becomes very interesting. And the kind of language used by the young boys from both the teams, abuse is being heard. And we often talk about how seniors are the role models of these young kids. And do you think this trash talking is trickling down the system? And as a broadcaster, as a parent, and as somebody who's watched cricket from an earlier era when the cricketers were slightly much more restrained in what they do and what they said, how do you react to that?
So this is where I have my dilemma. Anant asks me about how liberal we can be and how much space we create, and you want me to comment on, whether players in the heat of the moment, and these are young boys and girls. They play with passion. It's, I think it's an individual judgment. The teams, the coaches, the tournament, they need to put structures and they need to put filters and guardrails around this. But those guardrails should not be calcified. We need to be in tune with the times, and they should keep evolving. It should not be racially insensitive. It should not be culturally insensitive. It should not be making fun of people's, disabilities, etc. But some amount of banter, even if it is provocative, is part of the fun. I'm sorry, I've got myself in trouble.
No. Forget like the kids and all. Even as a broadcaster, the teasers which we see before a series, they're mostly about this close-up of cricketers in a very angry expression, and then we have some ugly exchange which gets discussed in the post-match show. So is it a storyline which is very popular, and is it the kind of change in the attitude of the audience? Maybe that's what they want. Like, how do you see this?
I don't know, Sandeep. Maybe you and I are very old, as Anant reminded me right in the beginning, that when I started my career, he was not even born. But nevertheless, look, it has to be done judiciously. But just imagine that if there is a very intense moment, a bowler has run and, has bowled a great ball and somebody hits it for a six. And if that bowler meekly just turns around and goes back, would the audience not suspect that the match was fixed? It doesn't even care that he gets hit for a six. Yeah. So where do you draw the line? It's difficult to have, objective parameters, but emotional reaction is a very important part of the sport and of the fans that love that sport. We'll have to draw some. In fact, and again, to get myself in deeper trouble, one of my problems is that commentary, especially in cricket, has been too sanitized.
Yeah.
So it's just become, and that is why matches, a lot of fun has gone out of the matches, because what we call color, and I'm not saying color in a flippant way, but what the more well-rounded, lively description of the sport has gone away. So relationship, through commentary, we are trying to make it too transactional. He came forward, he hit it, took 2 runs, didn't take 2 runs. So we keep talking about the life going out of cricket and it just becoming, things like T20 becoming just too transactional. But I think we are also responsible for that. And we need to think, how do we create a well-rounded, lively experience for people, which goes beyond just the scores and the runs, and yet is not socially detrimental.
So I understand there are two schools of commentary. One is the Navjot Singh Sidhu school, and one is the Richie Benu school. So, what exactly would you like to listen? And there is a mid path.
I would rather not comment on individual styles.
No, I'm just saying, it's a style of commentary.
They both have fans, but do not forget that there is also a gap of 30 or 40 years between the two schools of commentary, and the world has changed a great deal since then.
Right. Uday, since you mentioned commentators, it just came across that in terms of selection of commentators, it's slightly complicated in India because it needs the BCCI approval. There are some BCCI commentators. And how important is the public opinion? Because I don't again want to name people, but if there is a tweet by somebody famous against a certain commentator, or if a certain commentator says something about a particular player and he doesn't like, and then we don't find him in the commentary box the next game, is there a correlation there?
God, I am sinking so deep in problems here, but I will dig my own grave a little bit more. I have a very different view on that. I think there is a distinction that we need to make between cricket journalists and cricket commentators. You are a journalist. You are at liberty to say what you want to say, and your only discipline comes from the discipline that your paper imposes on you and your readers impose on you. A commentator is not, in my view, no offense, a journalist. A commentator is part of the entire package to make the game more entertaining, more popular. And I routinely see now a tendency between, among commentators who make this mistake. And I think, people like you are responsible. You give them a column, but you give them a column to describe the match, to bring about the fun of the game. And they think that they have just become Sandeep Dwivedi. That's not the case. There is a role for Sandeep Dwivedi and there is a role for a commentator. Right. You should not become a commentator, which is also happening a lot, because cricket, sports writers are just being commentators, and commentators should not become journalists. I have very clear views on that.
Right. Uday, I'll take you back to your days.
So, Anant, I have managed to offend both journalists and commentators.
I think a very unique innovation from your newsroom days, which people don't recall now, but I will. 2005 it was, I guess. You had a show called Match Ka Mujrim, which was a virtual kangaroo court for anybody, the non-performer of the day. So I'm just trying to understand how the whole thing works now, because now we see that post-match, in case if a match which India has lost, then there'll be this huge discussion on that one man who scored 100, saying that the whole effort in vain, and holding on to this one hope that at least that was the silver lining. How do you think the audience or the guys who make the calls how that has changed?
So let me just tell you a bit of the story behind Match Ki Mujrim, since you brought it, and the ghost still haunts me, I guess. But Match Ki Mujrim was a show that came out of a certain challenge that we were facing. I used to be the editor and CEO of Star News that time, and there was we had done some reportages which the cricket establishment of that time and the Mandarins who ruled at that time, they did not like it. So we were told that if you do not fall in line, we will not allow you to come to our press conferences or events, and we will not give you access. Right. And access was the big deal. And, we all know that access is the currency on which a lot of arm twisting happens in our world, right? And hence I said, if access is the biggest problem that, biggest pressure to which we bow down, let's just try and do something without access. So literally what we did was that, I remember at least, in one match in Bangalore, just across the road from the stadium, there was a public space where we went and pitched our tent, and we said, okay, we do not have access to the man of the match, but we have watched the match, and we will decide. There are two sets of people in every match. Those who help you win the match are very important, and they are discussed by the fans passionately. But even more passionately are the ones that, are discussed the ones who who have cost the match or who almost lost the match. So we would focus only on them because nobody wanted, and we didn't get any experts. So we just decided to, we didn't get any players. So we just decided to bring some experts, and we created something very lively. So, I think it has changed. In fact, this whole access factor is weighing so heavily on journalism today, especially in sports, that it's a matter of worry for me sometimes. Because, as a journalist, you should be able to write whatever, and by right, you should have access. Nobody does you a favor by giving you access. You get access on behalf of the people of this country and your readers and your viewers. And to use access as a currency of compliance is really disgusting, and it's a dangerous sign.
Uday, I'll ask you something slightly different. The role of broadcasters, again, like it used to be the fly on the wall, like we'll report whatever is being shown and we won't actually be interfering with the narrative of the game. Now, if you recall the Sandpaper Gate episode, right, and the Australia versus South Africa test match, and the camera person were from South Africa, the broadcast was in South Africa, and they were specifically following the ball from the hands of one fielder to the next fielder, almost like it was almost a scrutiny that, okay, we are going to get them, right? Now, where exactly do you find your role as, like, or you are just supposed to do that for every game, or are you supposed to do that? Because beyond the home team, I don't think there has ever been a case of a home team being caught ball tampering. Is always the visiting team. So this whole from fly on the wall to a very proactive role for the broadcasters. How do you see that?
Sandeep, in fact, in my view, over the years, I feel that the role of the broadcaster in determining the nature of the content has got reduced.
Okay.
And, people talk about the BCCI having played a very egregious or regressive role in that, in containing, some of the people, at least in BCCI, are accused of containing the nature of the coverage. But I think it's the same everywhere. And some places it is much worse. So without going into the specifics, I think the broadcasters, we often feel creatively, we are a creative company. The only thing we understand is how to make exciting content across genres, entertainment, sports, everything. And yet you would be shocked to see the kind of rigid framework in which sometimes people insist that we operate. You cannot do that. Camera angle cannot move. Why did you show this? You cannot show this. So it's actually, the broadcaster is getting more and more marginalized. The only time the broadcaster has a say is when the broadcaster is saying how much money they're going to pay for it. But after that, it's a downhill. So, and which is hurting the interest of cricket particularly.
Right. Will you be keen on the stump mic being on all the time and maybe a much more better experience, a richer experience for the fans, just to get the whole feel of the game, like early days? Yeah.
And you will get very worked up then.
No, I'm fine. No, I wasn't worked up. I was just like asking your opinion. I'm fine.
No, look, I think it does add a certain dimension to the experience of the fans, and we have to understand that today the matches are not really held for 30, 40, 50,000 people who are sitting in the stadium. The power of a sport comes from its streaming and its telecast, and which is what takes it to, literally hundreds or tens of millions of people. And the only way, the whole idea of a coverage, and the reason we spend so much money, so much technology, and so much expertise in this, is to replicate the experience. Ideally, everybody would like to sit right next to the pitch. That's my hypothesis, because that's where you get the best view from. That's where you get the best ambience from. But you can't. So you sit in the stadium, but you can't be in the stadium. So you watch it on TV or you watch it on Hotstar. And yet, we are under obligation to make sure that people get exactly the most real feel. In that sense, a stump mic or a helmet camera and all these things, and including other devices like slow-mo and ball tracking, all of that, they're helpful. But you also need to then sort of do the house training for everybody. so that there are no surprises, there are no shocks. We have to understand. Sometimes we expect too much from our cricketers also. These are all really young boys and girls who are, who have one great skill, but they don't have a degree in sociology. They are not trained diplomats. They are, and we expect them to say exactly the right words, and we expect them to do the right thing, and we want them to behave in the perfect manner even when the emotions are running really high. And what investment do we do in training them for that? So we'll have to, I believe that if you train the people, and if everybody is exposed to the consequences of what they should be mindful of, then all these innovations will only make the experience richer.
Okay, what about like we saw La Liga is almost now on a OTT platform, and so when will the day arrive when or are you keen on that cricket absolutely you have a direct link between the broadcaster and the viewer, nobody in between? Will it help, or do you see a scenario in the near future happening, or since Hotstar is
Look, it's already, I think in India television has a long runway. It will still continue to go for a long time, in my view, because it's one of the few countries where still new TV homes are being added, and we have about over 100 million homes that do not have TV. And television is a great experience, and it's also a status symbol for a lot of people. So when people come into affluence, one of the first things that they want to buy is a TV. Yeah. You should also understand that television is really cheap in this country. India is one of the one of the cheapest markets to buy television. So there is an economic case for that. And yet, the way the world is moving in this country, we believe that in the next 4 or 5 years, there'll be about 750 million handheld screens, and there'll be about 200 to 250 million TV screens. So clearly, the handheld devices will become very important. The good thing is that the same consumer, a large part of the same consumers switch seamlessly back and forth between TV and digital. Right. So for us, it really doesn't matter, whether people are watching it on TV or whether they're watching it on digital. For us, what matters is how much they're watching. And in that context, it's been great that we are able to offer them both on TV and digital, because if they can watch it in front of a TV, it's great. And if they can't, they can still log it to Disney Plus Hotstar and start watching it.
So you have everything covered. Anant, I'll just ask the last question, then you can take over. This is about that one big question about IPL, which I'm the obvious question. Lots of factors like the weather, the monsoon, the T20 World Cup in Australia, and other than that, ad revenues, fourth quarter, festival season, like are you even like thinking on those lines? How many factors can you think of when you are planning for an IPL? And one additional thing, will you be renegotiating your thing with the board in terms of the big contract? Because do you think that the market, there are enough people with money to pay the advertising during IPL?
So the last question I'll answer first.
Yeah.
It will be really suicidal for me to announce that I'm renegotiating through you. So
just an attempt.
Yes, nice attempt.
Yeah.
But that said, look, we all know that we are living through a perfect storm. I think the good news is that the BCCI is very keen to do something, because they know that people are, both for the love of cricket and also for signaling to the country that, life triumphs. That's sort of a signal. It is important that people get the IPL experience, and there are other tournaments that are lined up. But we really don't know when they will happen. And because, as I was saying right in the beginning, that we don't have a fix on the trajectory of the virus itself. So best laid plans can go awry at this time. So we are keeping our powder dry. We are ready. Internally, we are discussing, planning, everything. But we also wouldn't want the tournaments to be held unless the atmosphere is safe or reasonably safe.
Okay. Thanks. Anand, please.
So I'll just ask one question on the sports piece. We move on. But do you envision that you'll be paying more for digital broadcast rights eventually? I mean, once all this Corona stuff settles down, do you envision be paying more for digital than you would be paying for TV?
I think someday that would happen. But as you would know, right now, globally for every sport, television is still what brings the largest share of revenue for these sports.
But in India specifically, because Sony, we hear, seems to be, backing out of any bidding on sports, or at least on cricket, sorry. Would you...
There's a fair amount of cricket.
On IPL?
No, look, as I believe that television is still very strong.
Okay.
And when IPL happens, the power of the big screen is not going to go away.
The community, India, at the end of the day, is families and sitting and watching together, and
that exactly is the other one. That the whole idea of sitting somewhere with a group of people and having popcorn and chai in your hand or whatever, and then watching the match. That experience is very compelling.
Sure.
So I don't think television is going anywhere. Cricket is also advertising friendly sport.
Right.
And television lends itself to great brand advertising.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be there for a while.
So Uday, I'm going to move to Satyameva Jayate, something that I've told you a couple of times when we met that it's just such a... I felt very close, and I just felt very inspired actually by that project, by the format, by the innovativeness of it. So I want to talk to you about that and your journey there. But before we hear from you, we have a small surprise for the audience today. We've spoken to Uday's partner and collaborator in the project. He's on he's a struggler in Bollywood. Maybe you all don't know him. I'm not really sure. But anyway, we'll play a message that he sent out.
A very good evening to all of you, and hi Uday. I am a little hesitant to speak about you when I know that you're listening to me and you can hear what I'm saying, but I'll try my best to be as objective and straight as possible. I've worked very closely with Uday, and when we were doing the television show Satyameva Jayate, and I've spent a lot of time with Uday. We worked really closely together, and I found Uday to be an extremely sharp mind. Someone who thinks of many layers at the same time, as understands the macro, understands the micro. So he has a brain which I loved to pick as we were working, and I suspect he was just, patient with me most times. But I have to say that I really enjoyed working with Uday. It was a very wonderful experience working with him. Two things I'd like to mention here. One is, I don't know how many people know that actually the title of the show, Satyameva Jayate, was actually Uday's idea. He was the person who came up with this title. And all of us really loved the title. The other thing about Uday, which I find, there are wonderful qualities about Uday. He's intelligent, he's sharp, he's sensitive, he's, far thinking. But what I found most remarkable about Uday was that when we first met to discuss the show, and I told him what I had in mind, and he was quite excited about it. In that meeting, I made some really unreasonable requests or demands, as you may want to call it, to him. And to his credit, the request I made of him was that, I want him to air the show, like Star is going to be hosting it, of course, but I also wanted to air on DD, which is a competitive channel, Doordarshan. And of course, in the other languages that we were also coming out in, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Bengali, etc. So I told him that in those regions where Star is not the leading channel, I'd like him to give the show to his competitor, the channel which is leading in that language. It's a very strange, condition that I put in front of him, and he did not hesitate, actually, I have to say. And that's what I found most remarkable about him, is that while he's a great businessman and he understands business really well, he also understands that the essence of what we were trying to achieve in Satyameva Jayate was trying to communicate to as many people as we could. And my request was really trying to achieve that to the best possible. And which is why he didn't hesitate to say yes to me, to this very strange request, I would say. And that's what I found most remarkable about him. I felt that he's someone who really sees beyond just the financial aspect of things, And that is what I found most remarkable about him. I remember he hardly hesitated. I mean, he smiled at me when I made that request and he said, okay, if I understand where you're coming from. So he didn't really take time to say yes. I mean, I was quite shocked. So Uday, I'd like to thank you for all that you've done for Satyameva Jayate. And I believe that with all our efforts that Satya and Swati and all of us put in, Lancy, and the entire team, Monica, but I think that you and your entire team of Star really gave it an immense platform, and the kind of success the show has achieved would not have been possible, if it hadn't been for Uday's belief in the show and his entire team that believed in the show and worked with such love and passion. And so I'd like to thank you for that, Uday. All the best. Have a great evening.
Amir is one of the, the few opportunities I've had. He's just such a passionate guy, and he's such a perfectionist, and it's just not very easy to hear him say good things about someone. Actually, I've not had the opportunity of hearing too much of that. So there's something that happened there. I want to know your journey with it. Were you like trying to do something that your heart was in news and you kind of wanted to entertainment, or you wanted entertainment and news can come together, have that kind of societal impact, or was it you maybe telling news TV how they should be thinking about about TV?
No, the latter was not the case. I don't take myself so seriously, and I'm sure my news friends and brothers don't take me so seriously. But I had to be totally transparent. I had also heard horror stories about Amit. I was told that Amit just decides everything. It's impossible to work with him, etc., etc. And I said, how difficult could it be? If you've been a news editor, you work with some very difficult people. And I said, okay, we'll go and try. And I have to say that one of my most satisfying and fulfilling experiences was that project. I used to look forward to the time with Amir discussing content. And we would literally, every day that I had to go to Amir, my assistant would not plan anything for the whole day. Because the meeting would be for 1 hour and I would come back after 8 hours. And all those 8 hours, there would be a lot of food and there would be only discussion on that. And Amir was totally remarkable. And so I got drawn into it. I did want to do something that was more than just the regular entertainment. I'm a big believer in regular entertainment. People have so much stress and drudgery in their life that they need to be taken to a make-believe world.
Yeah.
And that has its role. But when you got their attention, I equally firmly believe that you should also, seed some relevant and serious messages. And that is what we thought we could do with Satyameva Jayate. And Amir turned out to be an extreme believer in the same agenda. So the idea was, this was 2011-12. Actually, it took a long time. Amir takes a really long time to decide things. It took me more than 2 years to get him to do this. So you can imagine. But it was also the time when there were all kinds of things that were coming up. Corruption and all, frustration, etc., environmental degradation, all kinds of issues. Because we were just coming off the high of, let's say, about 10, 15 years of economic liberalization. And there was this trough that we were hitting around that time. And everybody was, had questions and they had a point of view. And we just thought, what if we use the whole platform of Star across the country in all languages to just make sure that some of the biggest issues that this country is facing and is somehow not getting enough attention, can we just bring it to them? And that was the whole idea, that let's just give it a try. Because everybody said, one of the things that I learned from the entertainment colleagues was that it's about entertainment. Do not get serious. The moment you get serious, people will switch channels.
Right.
And I said, really? Do we really think that people are so sort of insincere about anything serious? And I wanted to try that, and it turned out to be a completely false premise. And that has revalidated in the constructive power of media to entertain, engage, and also, push very, very relevant messages.
Okay. Yeah. So, you've figured out the business model, even if with Satyam Jayate, even there was even with the seriousness of it in entertainment and in sports. But Uday, where did TV news go wrong? The just the way TV news is degraded in India. And these are at the hands of people who you've worked very closely with, people people you've shared you're starting your careers with. What went wrong, and why can't that business model? Why isn't there a business model for television news in India which supports high quality, original, independent journalism?
So a question, and then I'll give the answer. Where did newspapers news go wrong?
With the exception, of course, of
with the exception, and I would agree with that. I really love your paper, as you know. This is a paper that I've been reading, for the last 40 years.
Yeah.
So, but on a serious note, I think news in general has gone wrong. And it's sad because, as you said, a lot of those people I know, and there's some really good people. Their heart is in the right place and they have a good mind. And yet it has gone wrong because of two things. First and foremost, it started with a fundamental flaw in the business model. You cannot do news and sell it on the back of the largest number of people watching it, and then go and monetize the inventory on the back of that, because it creates a totally perverse incentive in the system. And that is exactly what happened. And the responsibility for that sits squarely with the government, which created, this whole regulatory model and all of that. So, good news can be only done by people who value good news and are willing to pay for it, which basically means disintermediate subscription.
Right.
So you want to watch this news channel and you're willing to pay 30 rupees for it. But, no news channel really has a subscription model that's taken off in this country. Some of them make some money, but it's hardly anything.
Yeah.
Most of it is on the back of advertising revenue. And when you're chasing advertising, you're chasing largest number of people. And when you're chasing largest number of people, you're going, you're going for the lowest common denominator. And that created such a perverse spiral in the whole system that it's really tough. So that's the first one. And the second one, I think, Anant, is the collapse of the news agenda has a lot to do with the compromised, and today's my day of getting myself into serious trouble, is also because the owners and followed by editors who just completely abandoned any pretension of a larger than life vision. That there are businesses and there is the business of news. I think there was an inbuilt pomposity in this assertion, but that is what made news honorable. That is what made news what it was. People who built news, including your grandfather, who believed that news was important and it was doing something very different and something very distinguished. I think a whole lot in this country, anybody could set up a news channel. In fact, news was a large number of people who own news channels or who have owned news channels in the last decade, 2 decades, have owned not because of their belief in content, but because they believe that it's a good bullet to have, that you can fire selectively.
They're in the real estate business, they're politicians, quasi-politicians,
absolutely.
Whatever.
Politicians, real estate people, thugs of all kinds, they've all come into that. And that has created a real big problem. And I think, I worry about where it's headed now.
Right. Sandeep, do you want to maybe open to the audience?
Yeah, we'll throw it open for questions now. And as Anand said, we have a very great lineup of people here. And I'll start with Rahul Johri, who's here. He's the BCCI CEO. And I think it'll be an interesting question. CEO asking the question to Uday, please.
You've discussed some of the dynamics of viewership, digital television. What I want to ask you is that the trajectory of pay TV has long been mired in our country with various obstacles. And some of the issues have remained the same for the last 10, 12 years. While on the other hand, digital has been growing, and this lockdown has given a tremendous fillip to the consumption of digital content, consumption of content. So, what, in your view, is the future of broadcasting, especially pay TV? And do you see digital subscription revenues overtaking pay TV?
I think, the pay TV, I was saying earlier, television has a future in this country. But one of the biggest challenges that it is facing is the whole pay ecosystem and the way it has been sort of devastated or has never been allowed to take off. I think somewhere there is a mindset in this country, in the policy establishment, that media is, they keep swinging between dangerous and, it's a dangerous business or it's a vice business. So somehow keep it suboptimal. And the pay ecosystem not having taken off is one of the biggest, one of the saddest thing that could happen for the industry. And that is why we are not able to invest enough in content. That is why we are not able to create enough robust business models. And that's why the range of content is not available. That you cannot, most people don't know how egregious are the controls on how you can sell your TV channels to the people. There is only a certain manner in which you can sell. You cannot bundle freely. You cannot give this channel, and you cannot incentivize. Even the discounts or incentives that you can give to the people who sell, distributors and operators, all of that is rigorously regulated. People don't realize media is probably, everyone thinks sectors like banking and healthcare, etc., are regulated. I think television in this country is the most regulated sector. You can't even change the logo of your channel without seeking permissions. You can't change the name without seeking permissions from multiple authorities. That doesn't happen. If a car company wants to change its model, it doesn't require anybody's permission. It may require to register it with some authority. But that is where we are. As a result of which, pay TV really faces a huge challenge. Despite all the promise, I think I don't think that the digital streaming services are anywhere at that scale where they can replace TV. So I think the trajectory is very good. They're very promising, but we all have to come together. The government, society, creative community, everybody has to come together and do the right things to build it and take it to a level where you think it can go. But otherwise, let's not say that the streaming industry is already set to steal a march. 20 years ago, pay TV looked really, really exciting and promising. It hasn't taken off because since then it has got no incentives, it has got no catalyst, and a lot of hurdles have been created. I hope the same will not happen with streaming.
One more question from the BCCI. We have Anirudh Chaudhary, former treasurer BCCI, and he's been with BCCI for pretty long, and he knows the ins and outs of broadcasting, everything. Anirudh, if you can please go ahead.
Hi, Uday. It's lovely to see you after a long time, and I think one has to give credit to you because I think your company is today financing world cricket. I mean, it takes a lot of guts to sort of invest into a property in the single-mindedness of purpose that you have shown. And normally you're the ones asking me questions. You've been the ones asking me questions. Ye kab hoga, ye kaise hoga. But today I have a question. Couple of questions. First is, these circumstances, everybody's been discussing them. I mean, you've talked about them. But in terms of business and keeping in view the paucity of time that you face for this year, how would you prioritize the following? The Indian bilateral series, the Indian Premier League, or the ICC T20 World, and don't you think that the delay in the decision by the ICC, does it affect you a lot, or it's okay to deal with? And the second question is, how far ahead in time do you think a virtual reality or augmented reality production for cricket and a remote broadcast control, and what are the roadblocks that you see in that, and which tech would you prioritize?
So, Anirudh, good to hear your voice. I can't see you, but Anirudh has been my friend and partner ever since my cricket journey began at Star. So he's a very, very special friend. But today he's trying to put me in a spot. How do I prioritize bilateral IPL, ICC, T20? We are not prioritizing any of these. These are all, Anirudh, you know how much money we have paid for each of these. We'll take whatever comes. And right now, the biggest challenge is that there's no clarity on when the tournaments will be held. And I totally understand that given so many variables, in the case of India, for instance, borders are closed. Globally also, travel is so difficult. People can't move, quarantine requirements, the fear of the pandemic. All of that makes it difficult. But for us, there is a real challenge. So for instance, as you said, the ICC T20 tournament not having the clarity doesn't help. In the case of IPL also, we know that the BCCI is keen to get it back, but they're in no position to tell us. So we understand these are exceptional circumstances and everybody's response is only suboptimal. We have learned to be patient, because one thing I do know is that everybody values, as Anirudh said, that our commitment to cricket is deeper than anybody else. And the satisfying thing is that people like Anirudh, who are in the leadership of cricket globally, they recognize that and they take our concerns seriously. On the AR, VR, etc., that's exactly what I was referring to, Anirudh. I think this is a huge opportunity. That technology-wise, the world is ready for it. I think somewhere, we were all victims of our muscle memory or sort of inertia. Things were going well. Everybody was happy. Now, with this disruption, I think there is pressure on everyone to innovate. So I think you will see a lot of fresh innovation and new experiments using technology, and that will be brilliant for the sport and great for the fans.
So we've gotten a few special guests to send us some questions pre-recorded. I think they may be on the call right now as well, but we're not quite sure. So there, there are going to be 3 or 4 questions that will come together. I think they're largely around the same thing. So maybe you can just remember what each person has asked and try to answer.
Sure.
So the first we'll start with Abhinav Bindra, followed by VVS Lakshman, and then Anil Kumble, and then Uday, our common friend and somebody I admire a lot, Sanjeev Mehta.
A couple of questions from my end today in these exceptional circumstances. To what extent would COVID-19 accelerate fragmentation of sports content, production, consumption? Example, bi-party Instagram live sessions. Second being, effect on broadcast rights for linear television, since ad sales is the only major income for linear TV, and brands may control their marketing expenses in light of low demand in the market across most sectors. What is the strategy going forward going to look like?
The situation the whole world is facing with the pandemic COVID, and live sports action also has been affected tremendously. I want to know from you that how do we prepare to tackle such situation, and what are we going to do when things get back to normal?
Recently, we have seen a lot of people watching live sport on their mobile apps like Hotstar. So I wanted to ask you a question. What, according to you, would be the next wave in broadcast or in viewership experience over the next decade?
My questions relate to 2 of your properties. One is cricket, where you've invested a large sum of money, with the spectator sport taking a bit of a backseat, at least for the foreseeable future. How do you see the future, and what are you going to pivot to ensure that you get some degree of fair return? Second is about Hotstar, your OTT platform, which has been absolutely a rip-roaring success. You're in the sweet spot. How do you plan to take it further and higher?
But first of all, thank you to Abhinav, VVS, Anil, and my dear friend Sanjeev. Look, I think Abhinav asked a great question on fragmentation. I think the fragmentation is happening, but I like to see this as segmentation. The multiple channels that are getting created, whether these are digital channels, TV channels, on ground, etc., each one is making the reach of the sport bigger, and I think that is a great development. I don't think we should worry about it. In the short term, it might look like the audiences are getting fragmented and destinations are not getting built, but over a period of time, I think these are all multipliers for delivering the content to a larger set of or larger universe of fans. So I think that is what will happen. The financial case, absolutely. This year looks like a complete disaster, and I'm impressed that Abhinav has thought so much about this issue, because I think given the way the economic challenges that the country is facing, and in the case of cricket, the real issue is that 75% of the total earning of cricket, even for global cricket tournaments, comes from India. So the Indian economy is the driver of cricket here. And that is going to be impacted. Naturally, all the other sports, the monetization model is totally devastated. But my only belief is that this is temporary. It's for a year or 2 years. And as we come along, as we go along, the economy will improve, and sports fans are so passionate about it that the advertisers and those sponsors who put money behind sports will come back. And right now, the most important thing is for people to be safe. And as soon as we can create a reasonably safe bubble for bringing the live sports back, that's the most important thing. Once we do that, it'll be really good. Anil's question, next wave, spoken like a true tech visionary, Anil. The next wave, I think the pandemic, and ironical as it may sound, is actually a great opportunity. I really believe that, look, every sport was first watched by people who gathered on the ground. And then stadiums came so that more people could watch. And then radio commentary, and then television broadcast. Each of these has made the sports bigger. And I believe that even if people are not in the stadiums today, sooner or later, hopefully sooner, they will start going back to the stadium. But in the meanwhile, this whole disruption is a huge opportunity for us to use technology to take sports to a much larger audience and make it even bigger than it has been. And I'm really excited about it. And my team, my team at Star Sports and Hotstar, Sanjay Gupta and all these people who work on sports, they are really excited, and they're really working on innovations using technology, using other creative means to see how can we make the experience richer and richer. Because let's face it, that sports coverage has been getting really somewhat typecast. And this kind of a disruption is actually a great opportunity, not just for us, but for all the sports lovers, broadcasters, sports bodies, everybody all over the world to innovate and see how we can just make sure, everybody has a mobile phone or has a tablet or is sitting at home. Can we just completely replicate the television experience, the stadium experience for them? And I think today it's exactly possible. And to the point that Sanjeev made, I think that's exactly where sports are set to go. If we use the COVID disruption as an opportunity to take sports to more people and create a fuller, richer, and more fleshed out experience for people who are not in the stadium, then the sports can get bigger. People will spend more time, watch it more, and the emotional intensity of the fans will be even greater. Fair return, Sanjeev, I'm coming to you with the request to be my biggest advertiser once again. So if Sanjeev Mehta wants, I will get the fair returns on cricket. If he doesn't want, I will struggle, but I believe in Sanjeev.
Great. Can we get a question from, now we've got Nandan Nilekani, Rishank, a very well-known kabaddi player, you probably know him, and Gautam Gambhir, all the next line of questions.
The startup he has done by creating a whole new tournament around kabaddi and telecasting it And I've seen this in so many places where watching kabaddi has become so popular.
Has there also been some planning for the Pro Kabaddi season this year? If so, will there be any restrictions or precautions?
I would like to congratulate Mr. Uday Shankar for promoting sports in India. I would like to ask him a question, like how he has promoted Kabaddi in India, which is a rural sport. Does he have any plans to promote hockey, which is a national sport and which is very close to my heart?
So, first of all, thank you to Nandan for those kind words. And, to the question on kabaddi, I think for sure we are very mindful, and kabaddi is a very close contact sport. We'll have to be extremely careful as and when we do kabaddi, because we'll have to create a safe bubble, because otherwise it's going to be risky. The first and foremost, we have to worry about the health and safety of our players and all the people who are participating in the tournament, whether it is the officials, support staff, and even our own broadcast media teams. So we are working on plans, and we are taking inputs from everywhere in the world. And I would like to assure everyone that we would not do a tournament until we are absolutely sure that we have been able to do everything that is in our control to make the tournament safe from a COVID point of view. And to Gautam again, thank you very much for your kind words. And you know that we have been involved with hockey. Actually, interestingly, the first league that we got associated with, that I got associated with in my watch, was the hockey league, and we've been doing that now for 8-9 years, and we believe that we have served the cause of hockey well. But you have to realize one thing, that whatever sport, league or otherwise we get involved with, we can only do as much as there is happening on the ground. There is a limitation. If there is not a groundswell of excitement around the sport, it's tough for us to do everything that we've done. With kabaddi, the great thing was that kabaddi's roots were really strong. It was not sophisticated. It was not urban enough. It didn't get played in fancy schools and fancy colleges. But there was nobody who didn't know kabaddi, and there was nobody who didn't find kabaddi exciting. And that's where I think we came in, and we said there is an opportunity to revive kabaddi, and that's why it's so big. So we can, media and companies like us, we can do a lot, but only when there is a real potential. Hockey, I believe, has a real potential, and that's why we are involved with it. And I think Indian hockey is looking better today than it was 10 years ago.
I'm going to bunch a couple of questions together. One that came in by text message from Uday Kotak about essentially future gazing and the future of the future. And another one that is on similar lines. I'll just ask Akriti to play that video for us. This is from Mr. Mahesh Babu.
What are the radical changes that are afoot in our industry in the sector of content distribution, exhibition, production, and audience ownership, which will each contribute to this renaissance that I fantasize about? Will the future be a modified continuity of the same, or something which we can't even begin to imagine?
Can I ask Anant Nath, who I always introduce as the very young father of long-form journalism in India. He's started the Caravan and from Delhi Press. Anant, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi Uday. This is a question regarding television programming, GEC television programming, and specifically with respect to Hindi programming. Do you think the TV programming is, or how reflective is the TV programming of the societal issues that we as the people are marred with? And I'm talking about fault lines of identity, which is class, caste, ethnicity, race. And do we at best give them lip service, maybe from a fairly upper caste lens of society? And is there excessive fixation with religion, either in terms of mythology or in terms of ritualism within the daily soap opera programs that we show? And by doing this, is therefore television, fueling a certain kind of nationalism? Not only doing that, but also maybe ignoring a larger viewership who may not relate with this worldview and who may be looking at beyond the layer of entertainment, some engagement with issues of, this caste and class and religion that they face in their real life.
So, thank you. You raised some really complex questions, and I think this could form the subject of yet another Adda by itself. But just to answer your questions, I think first of all, I do struggle with labeling the entire Indian society as a homogeneous entity. There is no such thing as an Indian society. There are multiple layers and deeply nuanced structures, both, along both the axes, the geographical as well as the social economic hierarchies. And the challenge of doing programming in a country like India, especially on a mass medium like television, is that you are forced to look at a common denominator, because otherwise you run the risk of losing attention. And so when you do that, there are some key issues that everybody takes up. And I think compared to television in many other countries, by and large entertainment television in this country, and I'm saying by and large entertainment television in this country is far more progressive and reflective of the emerging aspirations of society, or at least a segment of the society, than other parts of the world. But it's tough to capture all of them all the time, but if you see the spectrum of shows, there are shows that I have issues with, but there are a lot of shows, and I would like to think that at Star we've been particularly conscious of this, that on issues like gender, religion, etc., you do take a balanced view. But you also have to realize that in some ways, for shows to connect, you also have to mirror the concerns and the realities that exist in people's lives. You would have seen a sudden surge of mythological shows today. Ever since the lockdown began, it started with the public broadcaster, and then others have also done. We've also done our share of shows. But I think that we put the shows. Some of the shows were not successful in the past. Today, more people are watching it. Also because there is an atmosphere of uncertainty, fear, paranoia, and people want some kind of comfort and confidence. So those things happen. But I also don't believe that there is anything necessarily wrong with doing a certain kind of show. How you do this, you can make the Mahabharata. We made our own Mahabharata, our own version of Mahabharata a few years ago, and that's a very different Mahabharata from the Mahabharata that some other people have made. So fundamentally, there are ways in which you can deal with content. You can tell stories which are engaging and yet socially responsible. So
we've got a lot of questions, and we haven't touched on the issue of film. And so I'm just going to name the people who have asked this question that I could pick up. Sampada Sharma, Ramit Bhatnagar, Rajesh Mehta, and there are a few more. I couldn't quite catch everybody's names. But they're all pretty much asked, do you see this trend lasting for a long time where mainstream cinema moves its releases to OTT platforms?
So I don't think it's a substitutive trend, Anant. I think it is it's one more stream of for releasing cinema, and I think it is one of the best things that has happened. We just announced yesterday that we would do 7 films that we would premiere on Disney Plus Hotstar in the next 2 months, and some of them are really big films, and they're all very interesting films. And the reason we've been thinking about doing this kind of thing for a long time, because if you look at the concentration of theaters in this country, most people don't realize that on an average, according to the data, most people go to theaters twice a year. Twice, not more than 2 or 3 times in a year. And Indian film industry is beginning to choke because there are not enough release windows. And there is an appetite for films, but there are not enough films that can be released, because there are only 52 weeks in a year. There are only 52 Fridays. You'll be surprised to know that, big Fridays 2 years from now are already taken. So direct to digital releases or premieres is actually a great new initiative in my view, which creates.
Are you saying this as an OTT player? Or are you saying this as a producer?
Look, we are both. We are also one of the biggest film studios in the country.
Right.
So
you're saying for both, on both interests, you appreciate the trend. Yeah.
From both. And, in all honesty, I think it's a relatively smaller initiative for a streaming service because they have multiple streams of content available to them.
Yeah.
In the case of Disney Plus Hotstar, we have our drama and we have our live sports, etc. So for us, films are still small, as a content bucket.
Right.
But for films itself, it's a huge thing. And I just like to draw attention to the history. When earlier films were only shown in theaters, and then came TV, and television started buying the rights, and there were, massive discomfort, consternation, and there were fights. Oh, you cannot release a film at least 6 months or 9 months after the theatrical release, etc., because nobody will go to the theater. We have seen what it has done. It has made the economics of films better. More people are watching movies in theaters, and theaters are making more money, and the viewership of films has become bigger. And I think this is yet another. And then came the OTTs, which were buying films. Some of the other global OTT services and Hotstar. We bought some films, not for premiere. But I think now premieres have taken that whole initiative to a whole new level. And I think you can only make more films, so more stories can be told, more actors can get to do work, more creative people can work. So I think it's one of the best things that's happened. Which when we will look back, I think we'll all think that it was the right thing.
And what about the future of the exhibitor?
Cinema, look, theaters are not going to go anywhere. If the theater as an experience continues to evolve itself, as we have seen, nicer theaters, better sound, better audio quality, better seats, good. That's a whole complete experience. And OTT service that you are consuming at home will never be able to replicate that. So there will be, but people go to theaters twice or thrice a year. Those 2 or 3 visits will continue to take place.
Sure.
So I remain convinced that theaters have a great future, and so does, but cinema will only become bigger.
You've done your share of future gazing, but I'll just push you for a little bit more. The renaissance that Mr. Bhatt talks about.
And that's exactly what I was alluding to. Yeah. That I think there is going to be a renaissance because the more channels of reaching the consumer that we find, the richer the health of the industry will be. I'm a big believer in that. Industries begin to choke when the supply lines are choking. And I think, this country, the population density, the ratio of theaters to population is one of the most adverse in the whole world. And that's not going to change, given the challenge of building a new theater. You need 40, in some cases 50 approvals before you can build a screen. And then there are all kinds of other challenges. So if you do not use technology to create a bigger market and bigger universe of consumption, that renaissance that Mahesh was talking about is not going to take place.
We've got Mr. Bagri back. Should we start with Mr. Bagri?
Yeah, please.
See, this OTT platform, how can we use to advertise our brand? Brand like Bagri's can be advertised on this platform.
Sir, of course. Push. I'm just going to send somebody to you tomorrow itself.
See, my point is there are very limited avenues to advertise on this platform, no OTT.
No, there are no limit. Actually, on Disney Plus Hotstar, for instance, we have complete ability to customize and deliver your message to exactly the target audiences and in the parts of the country that you want the message to go. Even in a city, we can target it to your specific requirements. So I think it's a lot more friendly and effective to use this platform. I will certainly, on a serious note, I'm saying I'll get someone to connect with you, sir.
Wonderful. So I'll ask the last question is sent by text from Karan Johar. He starts with lots of praises. I'm going to fast forward that bit right now. He says he has the deepest respect for you. And what really strikes me as unique is that he can maintain social distance from the entertainment and sports fraternity and yet engage with them professionally with ease. How does he strike this balance of elusiveness and engagement?
That's very
Ending with a
nice.
personal question, and who better than Karan to send that?
Yeah, look, I think I'm not a product of this industry. I came through news, and now I'm here doing this. I see this as a job. I have deepest respect for people like Karan and everybody that I deal with. Some of them have become personal friends. But I think in order to maintain the objectivity and take the right creative and business decisions, it's important to maintain some amount of distance. I learned this as a news editor, where my first editor had taught me this, that if you're going and having a drink with the same person in the evening with who you're covering during the day, there is always going to be a problem. And I thought it keeps life complicated, uncomplicated. So I have great fondness for friends like Karan and Amir and everybody that I've come to know and admire and respect. But then I finish my work, I come home, I spend time with my family, I watch Star TV and Hotstar, play with my dog, and that keeps life simple.
Wonderful, Uday. So firstly, thank you so much for your time, and not surprisingly, great. It's been a very fascinating 1.5 hours for me.
Thank you.
And I really must say, we did call a few people, and in this Adda, we're trying to get we're still experimenting with the format, and we wanted to make it as visual as as we could, given that we can't meet in person, and we're not able to have the Adda experience, which you're very familiar with. But I must say that we didn't have the time, but everybody who we reached out to started with a whole bunch of praises for you. Really some wonderful things they've said, and I think when you hear from possibly Bollywood's most sought after person like Amir Khan and Sanjeev Mehta, who I think few people in India have the ear to the ground that kind of he does and understands corporate India and India as consumer market as he does. All say such wonderful things about you. I don't think it's I think it's a real testament to your accomplishments, and it's a pleasure to it's always fun to have a chat and learn from you. So thank you so much for your time, and to all our guests, thank you for joining in. Hope to see you the next Adda.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you, Sandeep, and to your team. Thank you for doing this.